moving right along, our second tech chat will be between Frank Yu of Questar and Startup Digest. Is a repeat moderator because he does a great job. And he's interviewing Justin Mallen, the founder of Silk Road Telecommunication. So we'll get to hear all about what's new. All right, I'll let you take it away.
Is it on? Thank you. Thank you, Rebecca. It is. It's not mobile.
It's those on-off buttons. It's when you get the customer call and it says, did you turn the computer off or on yet?
So thank you very much, and it's great to have you all here. And we're very privileged to have Justin Mallen, founder of Silk Road Telecommunications. And it's kind of the convergence of two really trending industries, which is mobile and cloud. So just very briefly, if you could just tell people what Silk Road Telecommunication does.
I'll try to be brief. Similar to Alvin, we have a couple of businesses, but we're actually keeping it under one umbrella, and it's been a progression. We started the business 12 years ago in the data center space, which was the original cloud. Cloud became a terminology that was used later on. And we expanded that business to working with the carriers in China on corporate services and corporate voice solutions. And we really saw a convergence of mobile devices and data. And our original thought process was really just, these mobile devices are pervasive. The need for data and the need for services from our data center were just continuing to increase phenomenally. And about 3 years ago, we started putting the applications together. We started putting the business management applications on the mobile devices with the telco background, which is where we brought that convergence to happen.
So one thing about Justin, which was really surprising, so he's been in China for almost 20 years. So I think some of you might have been in grammar school at that time when he first came to China. And Silk Road has been around for 12 years. So he's seen the many changes within the Chinese technology community, but most important, the business and startup environment. So I'm just wondering, Justin, so how would you characterize the different changes you've seen after being here for 20 years and being an entrepreneur for 12?
That's a really, really good question. And I actually started business in China 20 years ago on the export side, garment business, clothes. It was the easiest thing to do. You came in, you found a factory, you found an export company, and they worked with you. It was a very simple business. But it was there that we also saw the opportunity. And the opportunity at that stage was 12 years ago in China, everything was state-run, top-down, this is what you do. And services didn't exist. Services for these new, at that point, export-driven companies didn't exist. And the opportunity there really was bringing international standardized services to China. And at that point of working in China, it really was maintaining a conversation with the government and working with these state-owned run enterprises and trying to find the way to work together. And that evolution started evolving. And back then, to be a startup really was kind of out of the blue. It really wasn't a good idea. In fact, I actually remember when we started our data center business, we went to the Tongguanju, the Telecom Administration Bureau, and we said, do we need a license? And they go, what are you doing? And I said, well, a data center. They said, well, what's that? So you are the Telecom Administration Bureau. You do know what? No, sorry, we don't know. We don't have a license for it, but here, we'll give you an ISP license, take an ICP license. We'll let you know what happens later on. So it really was an education process. And then as that education happened, the directives from the government were less about working with state-run businesses and more about supporting private enterprise. And our business started in Hangzhou. We grew up in really this tremendous entrepreneurial environment, and it really was government going, hey, we like entrepreneurs, we think they're good. And as you and I discussed earlier, we're actually seeing the third trend. So the first trend was all state-run, government-driven. The second trend was state government working with private enterprise. And now it's at a point where the state and the government is pulling away from that support from the private enterprise. And the private enterprises now are starting to really realize this is something where they need to start performing on their own and really start building a business in the markets that are within China. So it's been a very interesting three-tiered sort of evolution within China.
Okay. So right now, well, after being in China, you've actually been witness to, what, 4 or 5 year plans. So we're currently in sort of a new plan, a new administration. And in this administration, foreign visas are a little harder. the restrictions on foreign investments may be getting a little bit more stricter. As a businessman, as an entrepreneur, and I assume you're a foreigner in China, so what do you see for the next 5 years in terms of for startups or for business, in terms of a climate, and how do you think people can respond to this?
Wow. I get my crystal ball out. I'll figure this one out. I'm actually really excited. And part of the reason I'm really excited is with the government pulling back, with this drive to, I guess, root out corruption, what you're starting to see is the playing field is actually getting closer to being level. It's still nowhere near there, but we are talking about a 5-year plan, and they actually seem to be fairly committed to making this happen. And where that gets exciting is it actually brings in a higher quality of entrepreneur. It brings in a higher quality of business person, and it really starts building this relationship between businesses as opposed to a government and a business relationship. So in the past, when you were doing business and working with a company, you'd try to figure out who was providing support to them. You know, were they sort of a government, supported business, or were they kind of on their own? Nowadays, you really look at a business that you want to partner with, or a customer you want to work with, or an area you want to open up, and you actually look at the metrics. You know, is this a good place to be? Is this a good partner to work with? Do they manage their business well? Do they run their business well? And that's actually bringing it to a much more interesting level. Now, once again, we're talking 5 years out. I'm only literally within the last 6 months sort of seeing the effects of this 5-year plan and seeing the effects of this top-down drive to really bring a sense of process to working within China. So I think it's actually going to be a very interesting time. And I think within that, the opportunities then open up. However, what's going to have to happen is older companies are going to have to figure out how to build a business without calling up the government going, hey, I need a little bit of help. And I think that's going to be really affecting the traditional businesses in China. And then the new businesses coming in, they're really going to have to nail down their process and nail down their standards and say, listen, we're going to be good for being good. So it's going to be an interesting couple of years, I think.
So one of the things that's, I guess, constant in this environment is that there's always change. So that's the only thing that's constant is the change. So what would you say are recommendations of how to adapt for a business person? Because you're right, you don't know what's going to happen in the next 5 years, but there's some essential skills and pointers that I guess any businessman needs to know in China. And what are your recommendations?
You have to keep that conversation open. And when I say conversation, I actually mean multiple conversations. One of the things that is very prevalent about China is this concept of interpersonal relationships, or, as Alvin's business, guanxi. Now, guanxi, you can define that as what it used to be understood in the West was this magic dust that you could sort of sprinkle on stuff and fix everything. And in reality, what it is it's developing relationships. Within China, you need to develop multiple relationships because you have multiple partners, one of which is the government. And you need to maintain that relationship and that open dialogue to really sort of understand the direction of where it was. So back to my initial example of getting our first licenses, they didn't have a data center license. Mm-hmm. So we got our ISP and our ICP licenses, which were very difficult to get 2 years later. Back then it was like, well, we need to give you something. And then we got a phone call 2 years on, and they said, well, how come you don't have an IDC license? Well, we said you didn't have one, and we maintained a conversation. So they knew that as soon as these licenses were starting to be available, they gave us a call, and they said, listen, now it's time for you to guys go get that application in. And that's the conversation you need to have with the government, with your partners, with whoever you're working with. Because what I'm seeing on the corporate side and the business side is a lot of businesses now are coming back saying, okay, listen, we need to build a stronger business now. And there's a lot of opportunity within this corporate community in China as the strong entrepreneurs and the strong business leaders are coming out going, well, we really need to start building a strong business. This is something we've kind of been growing our business based on market share, based on customers, based on government relationships. That's all going away right now. China's not growing as fast. You can't outgrow the problems you used to have. You can't call up the government to help you fix your problems anymore. So a lot of these business partners as well are coming back, and they're starting to develop that guanxi, those relationships with other businesses to learn best practices. So continued conversations across all stakeholders is the simple short answer.
have you seen a generational shift in the people you deal with? I mean, I guess 15 years ago, I mean, there's a different generation of technology companies. But now the companies are younger, they're more web-oriented. Have you seen basically a shift away from the old, not say that people above 35 is definitely a different generation than people under 28 here. But have you seen sort of a change in the people you deal with in these technology companies? Or?
No, actually, I haven't. The young entrepreneur is still the one with a sense of bravado. I'm going to take over the world. I know my technology. It's going to be great, and we're going to kick ass. And that's still the same young entrepreneur. The guys who actually make it over 35 and those of us who actually make it over 40, we had that sense. And then we had our bruises and I licked our wounds and we got beat up a few times and we stumbled and we fell and we weaved and we dodged and we went through all these changes to now where, yeah, we'd love to be able to say that we do that, but we actually know that we've learned and you have experience. But that little boy is still inside of us and that's what keeps us going all the time. But no, I haven't seen a fundamental change in the attitude of entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs tend to be, in my mind, a breed apart and on their own. And it doesn't matter where you are.
Okay. Maybe a few years back when I was talking to technology companies about the cloud, especially Chinese companies, they were always a little bit wary of the cloud because the physical machines are not in their premises. Do you still get that argument?
I got to tell you, this is a great question. We started off with the data center when the physical, as you said, the physical machines were not on their premises, and we had to convince people to take their machines and bring them over to our data center, and we put up great charts and telling them we were going to be 1/10 the cost. Okay. You know, and that was the first shift. Now we're in the second shift, which is to the cloud. And the cloud came to China really about a year and a half, 2 years ago. And there were several companies, and there's still several companies pushing out this idea of the cloud, but it never really took off. However, same thing, there was a lot of conversation, a lot of marketing, a lot of people talking about it. And companies now are coming back going, well, I don't need to buy a server anymore. I don't need to build a data center room was the first thing. Now I don't need to buy a server. And we're actually starting to see that shift within that space. Where I think the next shift comes in, and this is still the biggest one, because we actually do cloud applications and cloud services to corporate on top of our cloud data center, is then when you come back to traditional businesses and you go back and say, you can outsource your processes, your application, your software. The biggest one for them right now is the IT department. Because effectively you're coming back to them and you're going, well, your sales management, your corporate processes, your business approvals, you don't need to do that and you don't need to maintain that internally. And all of a sudden these business owners are coming back going, because now they're really finally at a point where they're almost going to outsource everything except for running their business, their core business. They're, no more servers, no more hosting, no more data center rooms. Now they're looking at outsourcing the software side of it. And there's a lot of pressure actually from these poor IT guys who are sitting there going, uh-oh, we might be out of a job. And so that's actually the next wave of what we're seeing happening. And the pitch is very simple. Mobile, cloud-based solutions. And the owners are like, wow, this is going to fix everything for us. And it's the poor IT guys who you would think would be further ahead of the curve. And they're going, uh-oh, we're in trouble now. It's actually a lot of fun.
Okay. And I guess the term mobile and cloud, right now, it's kind of a buzz term. But maybe in the future, everything will be mobile and everything will be on the cloud anyway. So how does that affect you?
Well, that's what we do. So for us, it's great. The faster we get there, the better it is. I don't think it's a buzz term. I think people take these terms and put them over stuff that's been around for a while. BlackBerry, for whatever's left of BlackBerry, was the first mobile cloud corporate business. Email. I mean, that was it. And they were jamming 10, 15 years ago. They were doing mobile cloud before it even existed as a term. They take these buzzwords and they try to put it over major industry trends, which is really just bringing solutions and services to what customers need. Unfortunately, we don't have a modeling agency. We're not as sexy as the consumer guys. We should talk later, though. But on the corporate side, I think the biggest drive to what we call mobile cloud now was really the concept that iTunes drove forth was you go online, you click on a little app, you download it, and it works. Now, granted, once again, BlackBerry drove that before. iTunes actually made it mass media market, and businesses and corporates are always a good 3 to 5 years behind consumer trends. They're coming back going, well, why aren't we doing that? It makes sense now.
Okay. How much time do we have? 1 minute?
One more.
Okay. So I'm a former Microsoft employee, and so when I was at Microsoft,
I'm sorry.
Don't hate me. The biggest thing that Microsoft feared wasn't Google or Apple. It was actually something Salesforce.com in the United States. In China, which is sort of relatively lagged in some way, is that what you're striving to be, or is there already a Salesforce.com here?
We are as close as you could be to that. However, we got there through a whole different route. My business never was about seeing what other people are doing and let's do it the same thing. We actually went the route. So Salesforce.com came the route of corporate U.S. business, track and manage email and conversations that customers are having and phone calls. Ours came back with the fact that there is nearly 1 billion cell phones in China, and salespeople in China are running their entire businesses off of their cell phones. And we had a telco background, and we said, well, why aren't people managing that process? And so, yes, it came to be, once again, in terms of buzzwords, to define what SRT does. Yes, the Salesforce.com of China. But in reality, we took a very developing sort of economy look at it to see what really was. Now, one thing that means is you end up leapfrogging. China isn't about sitting at a desk and sending emails. China is about giving the guy a phone call, sending a text message, showing up at his office, sitting down, hanging out with him. And that's the process that needed management.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Justin.
Yeah, that was very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I love your comment about how you plant buzzwords, or how people plant buzzwords over trends that have been going on for a long time. So I was thinking about big data.
I love big data. I love big data. That's a whole different conversation.
Yeah, okay. Well, next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.